Good evening, everyone. I will let some people roll in here as it's exactly 5:30 and we'll get started shortly. Good evening for everyone jumping in. I'm going to give it a few moments here, and we'll get started. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to respect y'all's time. So good evening, and thank you for joining us today to learn about Pierce Transit's Bus System Recovery Plan. My name is Rachel Holzheiser, and I am a Community Development Administrator for Pierce Transit, and I want to welcome you all to this live virtual town hall, which is being recorded. Pierce Transit began its Bus System Recovery Plan efforts in July. This included analyzing service data and surveying the public to ascertain their transit needs and wants. Our goal is to strategically increase and allocate transit resources across Pierce Transit service area, especially after the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. During this town hall, transit planning professionals from Nelson Nygaard will discuss two possible scenarios for the future of Pierce Transit service, and Pierce Transit Principal Planner Darren Stavish is here as well to assist in answering any questions. A survey will be made available after this town hall to gather which improvements have the highest and lowest support from the public. This feedback results from the August Design Your Transit System survey, ridership and demographic data, and Pierce Transit staffing levels will all inform a final draft of improvements to be proposed to the Pierce Transit Board of Commissioners on November 13th. During this event, everyone will be on mute except for our presenters. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function within Zoom. There will be time at the end of the presentation for a general Q&A, and we will circle back to check for any questions. Closed captioning is available throughout this presentation. Please click the corresponding button on your Zoom menu. Interpretación está disponible en español. Por favor, presione el botón de interpretation abajo para escuchar esta presentación en español. Prior to starting, if you could please take a moment to let us know how you heard about this virtual town hall. A poll should be popping up on your Zoom screen. I'll just give it another moment while we get a couple answers. All right, thank you, everyone. And with that, I would like to hand it off to Thomas Wittenman, Principal Planner with Nelson Nygaard.
Hey, thank you so much. I want to start off by saying, just introduce again, why are we here? Why are we looking at doing a bus system recovery plan? And the principal reason for this is that, COVID-19 definitely changed how people traveled, when they traveled, and how they traveled. And even though that some of the restrictions that Pierce Transit had, during the pandemic, even though they've been lifted, Pierce Transit has been unable to add back all the service that they reduced during the pandemic due to a lack of bus drivers and maintenance staff. And this is mechanics in particular. And right now, Pierce Transit is operating at about 80% of what it was pre-pandemic. So this bus system recovery plan is all about providing a roadmap to help us build back the service that was reduced in 2020. I want to be clear here that during this presentation, when we say words like restoration, we mean bringing back the fixed route bus service levels that Pierce Transit offered between 2017 and 2019, and especially improving the frequency and span of service of the existing network. The study and subsequent recommendations in an implementation plan will not look at bringing back any fixed route services that were eliminated in 2017, and it is not evaluating the possibility of restoring or extending the existing Pierce Transit bus service boundary that has been in effect since 2012. So just wanted from an introductory perspective say, this is all about how can we restore service that was reduced as a result of the pandemic. The bus system recovery plan seeks to look at how the travel patterns have changed, capture some of the public feedback in terms of, what is it, how have things changed and how is Pierce Transit, meeting those needs in the community right now. And then look at taking some of the data for that, and we'll talk about it in just a second, and recommend a series of service options that help improve mobility for existing residents, existing employees, current riders, as well as existing future riders. And doing so, considering the changes in where people live, where they work, and who are the travel patterns of the highest needs folks out there. So what are some of the things that we looked at as a part of this? We looked at ridership and transfers for every route, weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And we looked at it from what bus stops folks were riding at for each one of those days. We looked at the travel patterns of non-bus riders, of everyone within the region, by looking at cell phone data. And this is each cell phone that you have puts out a signal that can be tracked. And using anonymized data, we're able to take a look at where people within the Pierce Transit service area, where are folks traveling to and from, and then make the determination of, does Pierce Transit service serve those areas, and where are those biggest travel patterns. We also looked at where population employment was growing, and where things had where the biggest employment sites were within the region. And we also identified where some of the high need areas are, where are the folks that need the service the most, and where are they going. And we didn't just look at what is today. We looked at where future apartments are being built, where new additional low-income housing is being built, where additional potential job sites are being built, to help influence where should service be restored first. So, in addition to taking a look at a series of data, we also had a survey and did some outreach to help understand what was the priority for folks in restoring service. And we got stakeholder feedback. We got over 750 responses from riders and non-riders. 50 of those responses were from bus drivers, folks who are the eyes and the ears of the system and hear what they hear their customers saying. We had asked that, ran a prioritization exercise that helped us understand what's most important for both users and non-users to have Pierce Transit restore service. And later evening service and earlier morning service and Saturday service, as well improved transfers and frequency, were some of the things that were keys. And folks saying, I would use Pierce Transit more often if these things happened. I'm really happy about the response rate for this. 750 responses is one of the highest responses that Pierce Transit has received on any service planning piece or job over the past decade. So I'm really happy about that. And it gives us some confidence in terms of what the priorities, the community priorities might be. So what do we do then? We took how the service is operating, what the market for transit is, what the community feedback was, and developed two different scenarios to rebuild service to pre-pandemic service levels. And I want to be clear here that even though we say we can rebuild to this level, this is not something that can happen overnight. Any recommendations that come out of this process need to be phased. And what that means is that the first element might be implemented in 2024, but not all of the elements will be implemented. They depend on additional mechanics and drivers, bus drivers in particular, to help put that service back on the street. The other thing, in looking at this from a scenario perspective, we're able to highlight different strategies on what's most important. And we saw and heard that frequency and how early and how late service operates were some of the key considerations. And so we built two different scenarios around those different, high priority elements. And this is not, in 2017 and 2016, Pierce Transit significantly changed some of the routes that were being operated. There are very few changes to existing routes as a part of this. This is mostly about where do we restore frequency, where do we restore later evening service, and in some cases, where do we restore earlier morning service as well. One of the other pieces is that both scenarios include what's called a new Pacific Avenue SR7 enhanced bus service. An enhanced bus service is, a new service that will parallel Route 1 between Spanaway and the Tacoma Dome station and offer an alternative and supplement Route 1 by providing a limited stop service that is 14 minutes faster between Spanaway and Tacoma Dome than Route 1 is. There will be 14 different stops that'll use existing bus stops associated with this and use transit signal priority to help speed folks through intersections and have a quicker and more reliable travel time. And it'll provide timed connections to certain trains at Tacoma Dome Station to ensure that regional travel along the Pacific Avenue and SR7 corridor is enhanced. So both scenarios include this, and it's a true improvement in mobility during the morning peak and the afternoon peak over Route 1, what's out there today. So I want to talk about some of the key elements of each different scenario. And the first one, is the focus on the span of service scenario. And, as I mentioned earlier, that there's only a couple of routes that have changes associated with them. And this one has 4 different routes that have changes associated with them. Routes 13, 63, and 425, and the eastern portion of Route 409, that is east of downtown Puyallup, will be changed as a result of this and removed. These are some of the lowest ridership routes and lowest ridership segments that are operated by Pierce Transit, and service in these areas will be replaced by runner service. And you might ask yourself, what is runner service? Runner service is Pierce Transit's on-demand public transportation service that allows you to use your phone, either a smartphone function or by calling, to reserve a ride that will take you to anywhere within a dedicated zone, and same fare as a regular fixed route service, a regular bus. And it can either provide you point-to-point transportation within that zone or provide you service from inside that zone to a bus stop so that you can catch a different Pierce Transit bus to get to where you're going. So it's a new feature. It's or relatively new, but it's a way to that we're looking at providing more cost-effective coverage in some of the areas where bus service, traditional fixed route bus service, has not been as successful. This scenario also looks at 4 different frequent service routes, every 15-minute service, throughout the day on weekdays, and this is on routes 1, 2, 3, and 500. We also looked at restoring, timed transfers at the Tacoma Mall when buses run less frequently. And then this doesn't mean during the afternoon peak. This means when, during evening times or on Sundays when service is only operating and when most routes going to these locations are only operating hourly. So this is a way to help provide better connections during during low frequency or during 61 services every 60 minutes. I talked earlier about the runner service replacing some of the traditional fixed route services, but I think the key thing with this scenario is that which bus routes receive earlier and later service. As a result of this scenario, almost every route operates on weekdays between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. and on Saturdays between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. and on Sundays between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And for most routes, this represents anywhere from a 2 to 3 hour improvement in how late or early service is operating. This responds to one of the biggest things that we heard as a result of our initial outreach. So what might that look like? And I've got a chart that, oops, sorry, that might show this. That this focus on span of service scenario, would encompass these different areas. This includes an expansion of the Tide Flats runner zone to replace Route 63, the implementation of a new Gig Harbor runner service, and then there's several other zones that are existing runner zones. As you can see, the route structure overall is very similar, almost identical to what it is today, except for those 4 different routes that are being replaced by runner service. And there are 4 different high frequency corridors, including routes 1, 2, 3, and 500. I recognize that this map might be a little bit difficult to read on screen. And so there's a QR code on this map. If you have the ability to use your smartphone to use that QR code, you can download this map as well as the frequency charts that we're going to show next. This is a representation of the proposed span and frequency of all the different routes operated by Pierce Transit, and it's for weekdays. And it shows, 4 different routes, the 1, 2, and 3, and 500, with a green coloring, which indicates service that comes every 15 minutes during that time. And, the other piece that I wanted to specifically highlight, because it is an improvement, for the scenario, almost all routes operate later than what they do today. So this is a significant improvement in mobility and gives more choices, for folks to do things later in the evening, whether it's for entertainment purposes, work purposes, or just visiting folks, or for coming home late after your shift goes late. Again, if you'd like to see this chart right here, there's a QR code on the side that you can click on that or scan that, and it'll take you to a place where you can download these different pieces. The other scenario focuses on frequency, and these are also called headways. And in this scenario, we'd have 2 different routes, the 409 and the 425, be replaced by a new Puyallup runner stations, very similar to the last scenario, but have 7 different frequent service routes, the 1, 2, 3, 41, 48, 54, and 500. The 41, 48, and 54 operate in some of the highest need areas, and they have a good ridership and good productivity, and that's why they were targeted for service improvements, frequency improvements, for this. Like the other alternative, we'd be looking at restoring time transfers at the Tacoma Mall when buses are operating hourly, which is during Sundays and later evenings at times. And more routes would operate every 30 minutes throughout the day. And the highest ridership routes would operate later 7 days a week. And this is the key thing here. It's not all routes would operate later during the day, but just the highest ridership ones. And so this is, a similar map of, what we'd be looking for. The routes in blue represent the routes that would operate every 15 minutes throughout the day. And, there's no new runner zones with this other than the Puyallup runner zone on the right here. So what does this look like from a frequency perspective and a span perspective? This is a listing of, the every route on a weekday that Pierce Transit operates. There are 7 different routes that would operate every 15 minutes for this. There are the 1, 2, 3, 41, 48, 54, and the 500. And one of the keys here too is that only some routes would operate later evening service. Most routes would still end when they do today, on weekdays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So where are we right now? We've designed, a series of different scenarios. We're looking to get feedback from you to help us understand what some of the priorities are, if the scenarios that we put together actually match some of the priorities that you might have, and use that feedback to develop a draft bus system plan that the board will have an opportunity, the Pierce Transit Board of Directors will have an opportunity to comment on during the November 11th meeting, and then look at developing a final bus system recovery plan for board adoption in December. So in order to make this happen, we need your help. We need your feedback. And we want to listen to what's most important for you. Any one of the improvements that we see as a part of this presentation, with the exception of the Pacific Avenue SR7 enhanced bus service, which will begin in March 2024, every other one of the improvements right here depends on how much support it gets, and also from an implementation timing perspective, when additional bus drivers are going to be available, and when mechanics are available. But we want to hear from you. What's most important? There's a QR code on the screen right now that will take you to a survey that asks you to gives you the opportunity to provide feedback on the 2 different scenarios. It goes into a little bit more description of it as well. If you can't use the QR code, piercetransitsurvey.com will take you there. And if you're looking for more information about the plan, you can find that at piercetransit.org/service recovery plan. And finally, if you have any additional questions or comments after we're done with this meeting, you can call Darren Savish at 253-983-3329. So that concludes the formal presentation, and we'll transition to taking questions, and hopefully we can provide some clarification on that. Thank you so much for listening. We'd be glad to answer any further questions.
Thank you, Thomas. Let's see. We had a couple questions. Please feel free to use that Q&A function and type any that you may think of. We are here to answer those and provide any insight that we can. Jenny asked if we could email her a copy of the recording. It will be posted on our website. It would be quite a large file to email, but it will certainly be accessible. I can send you the link to the video once we have that uploaded on our website. We do have the first virtual town hall recording on our website already, and that is at the URL posted on the screen. I'll send you the other one as well. And Dave, I see your hand is up. If you'd be able to type your question in the Q&A, that would be appreciated. All right. There's not any questions that you all have. We will be hanging out until 6:30. Oh, here we go. Anna's got one for us.
Okay.
All right. How much does the bus system look at what business employees would use the bus if run at times and frequencies? I work at Multicare Tacoma General, and we as employees get free bus passes, but the current route that can get me to work leaves right about the time I leave work, and the stop is 2 blocks away, so I would miss it.
So let me start with that. And first of all, I should share your frustration when you're so close and yet so far associated with that. It is very frustrating when it comes to that. I think there's when we looked at where the major employment sites were, it becomes very difficult to look at each specific employer and say, when do shift times open? And even like a medical facility has multiple different shift times, so you're looking at how do we begin hitting that? I think one of the ways that we have tried to accommodate things like that is taking a look at those routes that go past the biggest employers and, and look at improving the frequency on some of those alignments. And like, for instance, routes 1, 2, and 3 would be some of those examples. So even if you did come out and say, I have to walk 2 blocks and, I just missed a bus, you'd be waiting at most, 14 minutes, for that. If the route that is by there and, is not one of the routes that would come every 15 minutes, then it is a little bit more difficult to try to time that. But, certainly when we look at when the timing of routes are, we look at when folks get to some of the major destinations and also how to time connections between other routes. So I'm not sure that 100% answered what you're saying, but I wanted to give you a little bit of insight of some of the things that we consider when we look at, where and when routes go.
Yeah,
Thomas,
thank you.
she posted a follow-up question saying she takes a 16, but I believe that was one of the ones that we're looking at to replace with Runner, correct?
No, the 16 is one of the ones we'd be looking at operating later as
Oh,
well.
good. Okay.
I
Good,
believe
good.
it's also on the
You want to jump back to that board or to
Yeah.
see the span of frequency board we can answer for?
Yeah. Let's
Because I don't know when she works. I had it confused with the. I had it confused with the
Yeah, on the 16, we'd be looking at operating every 30 minutes throughout the day and operating it, in the headway scenarios, it remains till 8 o'clock. And, the span of service, scenario, we'd also be looking at every 30-minute service, but later evening service associated with that. So it's 30-minute service. It'd be at least 30-minute service, for you.
Yeah, we'd be doubling it under this proposal.
Doubling it. So I believe it's hourly right now.
Okay.
Thank you. And then we have a scenario from Jay. I live on the east side of Tacoma. It takes me 2 to 3 buses to get to the Tacoma Dome Transit Center. Then it takes me to Tacoma Dome Transit to work in Seattle. So he's walking up hills before work and has to take the 54, the 1, and then the 594 to Seattle.
And so this is one of the, depending on when you're going, one of the potential improvements, that we'd be, that this would offer for you is the enhanced bus service that when you transfer from the 54 to the 1, during the morning peak time and the afternoon peak time, there's going to be 3 more buses an hour from the connection point with a 54 to Tacoma Dome Station. So this should be, first of all, that's a faster ride than Route 1, but more importantly, it's less waiting for your connecting bus, so that you will have the opportunity to more reliably make sure that you get to the 594 as a result of this. And, depending again on the time that you're looking at making that connection, you could have a connection with the Sounder as well that, could get you depending on when you're traveling faster into Seattle or from Seattle than the 594 does.
He also mentions that he takes the 72nd Street bus, so I'm going to assume that's the 202, which is one of the ones that's targeted for greater improvements, but I'm not quite sure. He says you need to have a bus down 72nd Street. We do already. I'm not sure what he means.
The 202,
that is a 72nd Street bus.
Yeah. The 202 would be also, targeted for frequency and span improvements in both scenarios.
Yeah, maybe he can flesh out his question because he says to the transit center, but that is the eastern terminus is the 72nd Street Transit Center. So I'm not quite clear what he means. Hopefully if he stays on, maybe he can.
Well, while potentially we get some more on that. Oh, okay. Jay just said we just need a bus down Portland to the transit center. Are you thinking Tacoma Dome or which transit center?
Wait, we have a Portland Avenue bus. Yeah, I'm not clear which bus he's referring to. Tacoma Dome. Oh, okay. From Portland Avenue directly to TDS. Okay. Hopefully he'll stay on and we can look at that. What we're probably going to suggest is if he wants to, because this plan is not looking for to make new routes or to divert routes or to change any routing whatsoever. So that work will take place under our long range plan, which will begin next year. So there's a couple ways you can participate in that. You could either send something to customer service, these suggestions, or you could sign up on piercetransit.org on our homepage, and you can flag what you're looking for, what you'd like to be notified of, specifically the long range plan or routing changes or anything. He said he understands. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jay, for your input and your experiences. We definitely appreciate that. Dave says, admittedly, I don't know much of the backstory of how we got from there to here other than escalating costs, but are there any plans to provide other amenities other than increased service?
I'd have to bounce back to him and ask him, what does he mean by other amenities? Is he talking about like shelter improvements or something else? I don't know when we say amenities, that's usually something that's not the service itself, but something that's on the ground, whether that's better lighting or shelters where we don't have shelters now or additional benches or anything. So maybe if he's still on, he could.
Shelter improvements is what he just said.
Mhm.
Oh, yes. Thanks for that clarification. Yes, there is a project in place right now. In fact, the project manager just presented to our Community Transportation Advisory Group, or CTAG, last Thursday on a brand new shelter design that has a lot fewer panels, glass panels that cannot be easily broken. We've got $1 million set aside for that. And we also put in for a $2.5 million earmark at the federal level that we think we have a very good chance of getting next year. That would probably buy us another 200 or so shelters. So there is a system-wide shelter redesign project that they're much more vandal-proof, so less prone to vandalism. So yes, we are working on that. That our bus stop manager also has a project in place to get a bench at every stop, whether it's a shelter. Well, of course, they have benches already at every pole stop. So any place where there is a stop would have a bench outside as well, ideally next year. So we're still able to, well, outside sources, yes. I mean, it would be at either the federal or state level. This is a federal earmark, congressional earmark that we're looking at. It was on the recommended list, and that's for $2.5 million for shelters. So hopefully that answers his question. It's not promised, but it certainly it's on the recommended list. And that's through the former mayor of Tacoma, who's now the U.S. House Representative member, Marilyn Strickland. Should we take the next one, Anonymous?
Yep. I'm on it. Is there any focus on making transit/late night transit more accessible to unincorporated Pierce County, parentheses, not just Tacoma?
Well, I guess, yeah, we'd have to go at the route level. Thomas, you wanted me to be specific route that the person might be looking at.
It's I'm trying to think of where parts of unincorporated, Pierce County. And first of all,
one for sure, the south end of the one.
Is a part of the focus on span scenario. Every route, whether it's in Tacoma or outside of Tacoma, Lakewood, unincorporated Pierce County, every route would operate until 10 p.m. on weekdays, 10 p.m. on Saturdays, and 8 p.m. on Sundays. So that's one of the highlights of that scenario. So it's not just focusing on service within downtown or within Tacoma, but also throughout the entire region. The focus on the frequency scenario focuses a lot more on some of the highest ridership routes and some of the routes actually in Tacoma. So and then some of the service, how late service operates, is very much focused on the highest ridership routes, not all routes. So, this is a key difference between the two different scenarios. And if you feel strongly that focusing on later evening service throughout, various parts of the region, whether it's Lakewood, Spanaway, unincorporated Pierce County, within the existing service boundaries, of course. And please take the survey. Please let it be known what your opinion is on what you think should be prioritized, because that's exactly the type of feedback that we're looking for.
Thomas, the good news is too, all that is that the two routes that do serve unincorporated Pierce County are the 1 and the 4.
Okay.
And those are both high
Yeah.
priority routes for greater span and frequency improvements.
Yeah.
So the 1 being north-south, and then the 4 being the route that connects Lakewood to Puyallup, South Hill.
Yeah, great. And then the last one is just a comment again from Anna, who had worked at Tacoma General, just saying how half hour would be helpful. And she gets off at 7:30 p.m., which I would call back to the survey, because you are able to prioritize which improvements you would like to see and then let us know why. So if it's work related, or you can explain kind of why you chose to prioritize which improvements you would like. And Lonnie is stepping off. Thank you, Lonnie, for joining us. We appreciate it. And we have a question from Jay. Why is it that buses don't run later in the evening and during the weekend? I can get to work on a Sunday, Seahawks game day, but then when I get off work and get dropped off at the Tacoma Dome Transit Center on a Sunday after 6 p.m., you're stuck there like on an island. Tacoma does not have late night service. People service the city first of a population of over 225,000 people. People outside of the city don't vote for transit taxes levies.
Well,
So the main
let me-
question on, evenings and weekends and why our current levels are where they are.
Let me start here. It, in 2019, service did, operate, later than what's out there today. And certainly on Sundays, I believe it was till 8 p.m. is when more routes operated on Sundays pre-pandemic. So you would not be on an island in 2019. However, due to one of the impacts of this pandemic was, that there was simply less operators and less mechanics. So there was an inability to provide all the service that operated during the pre-pandemic. And while Pierce Transit has been operating feverishly to try to attract new bus drivers and mechanics to come work there, there's still a long way to go to make up for the number of both bus drivers and mechanics necessary to fully restore the service. So one of the things, where was service reduced? It was reduced during the times where ridership typically was the lowest. And that unfortunately is during evening times, in particular weekend evening times.
Yep.
And so that's from a backstory perspective, why this was done. It's not something that anybody's super happy about, but we're here to talk about what's most important to restore service. And if restoring Sunday service later than what it is today is one of the things that you feel is the most important piece, I would love to see that comment in the survey or a response back to us, for that.
I think a couple of things we can share too is that I'm going to assume it's him, that Jay, that what he's proposing, other people propose too. He's not alone. We see this. We've seen this over and over again, where people have said later service and weekend service over prioritizing that over frequent service, which is the opposite of I was saying before I started this. So he's not alone. People are on his side, and that's what we're hearing over and over. I do want to emphasize too, anybody outside of the city of Tacoma that's in our service area does pay the 0.6% sales tax. It's not just Tacoma sales tax. It's called the Public Transportation Benefit Area, or we call it PTBA, and it's synonymous with the Pierce Transit Service Area boundary. Any retail purchase is taxed at 0.6% for Pierce Transit services exclusively. So it's not just the city of Tacoma. We can't email you the survey. You'd have to go online and access it yourself.
We should be able to email the link though.
Oh, okay. Never mind. I'm sorry.
Transitsurvey.com.
Okay.
And I'll make sure that happens for you, Jay. So yes, certainly
Mm.
we'll email you the link to the survey, not a problem. Thank you for your input, by the way.
Thank you, Jay.
Appreciate it. It looks like no other questions at the moment, but if anything has come to anyone's mind, we're certainly here and happy to answer and provide whatever insight we can. We're slated to be here till 6:30, so we'll be hanging out, but if it ends up being a drought of questions, you're welcome to hop off for your day. Again, thank you for joining us, and please offer your input and thoughts on these potential improvements and the scenarios at the survey at piercetransitsurvey.com. We definitely appreciate it and need your feedback in order to know what direction you want us to head. So thank you again for being here today, and we're here if any other questions come up.